So our next presentation is City of Greensboro. Zach Peterson and Vance, who's just gonna drive the boat, apparently. Zach has been around a long time. If you have not joined him on Instagram, he does a great garden adventure. I actually love I call it flower porn. I love looking at all the flowers that he has out there. He wanders around with, it's your son, isn't it? Yeah. He wanders around with his son, and there's pictures of bugs and flowers and things that are roaming around. So right up my alley. He's also a pretty good singer. And he's pretty fun. So I enjoy being around Zach. All right. Can you click the X on that thing right there? And with that, I am going to hand this over to Zach and let him tell us what to expect when we're migrating.
Thank you, Hope. Is there another mouse? Actually, you cool with that? Yeah, you're more than welcome. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Zach Peterson. I am a GIS analyst for the city of Greensboro. I've been there almost 10 years. Can't believe it. And welcome to Daunting Task Friday. It looks like this has been the theme for this segment in the presentation. So my talk today is about basically what you can expect when you're doing a data migration from the utility net or from the geometric network to the utility network. Slide, please. So just kind of brief background. Esri's geometric network has been in existence for almost 20 years. It does have a planned end date for around 2024, so no more support. Oh, thank you. And so there is an end of life that's in existence that we need to face. The utility network evolved out of platform expansion from Esri, so for web-based solutions. So it's got to move. So utility network introduces a brand new data model. It's completely different. I tell people it's like turning your head around and looking backwards. You have all your complete data sets and they're going to a place and you have no idea how it even works, how it functions. So we're going to get started. So that's our overview. So what are the benefits of actually doing this daunting task? What are we going to get out of it? So obviously enhanced representation, so better representation of what's really in the, how it is in the real world. It's a smaller, compact data model. Scalability, we can edit across multiple data platforms, so we can do mobile, web. Introduces a whole new set of data integrity rules. The way I like to describe, yes, ma'am, thank you. The way I like to describe the geometric network is you had no rules, you could assign all your own rules, and you play by those. The geometric network is you have every rule on the table, and we're going to ask you to select what you don't want. So it's kind of looking through the window in a different way. And of course, this provides 30-year support. So there's kind of 4 components: a data readiness piece. You want to think about how you want to plan for your migration, deployment, and then of course, training. And I want to kind of stop here and just kind of tell everybody like where we are in this project, because I think it's kind of valid. So City of Greensboro, it's a 3rd largest city in the state. We have about 1,500 miles of water. So we're a mid-sized utility, and we all handle this in the water resources section for the city. We are a GIS-centric shop. We are in our section specifically, we do a lot of asset management, and all of the assets that we have in the city are kept inside this GIS database. So we usually rely on GIS to be our asset container, and then we have our EAM for support for how our work goes. So you can see that relationship. So for the data readiness, When we get prepared to do this, what are you going to think about? What are the things you want to take advantage of while your system is down? What do you want to look at? So the four things that we did on our prep plan is obviously wanted to look at the schema, and you're going to have to really concentrate on your schema. You're going to get intimate with your schema. And I know that sounds really crazy, but it's really, really going to be something you have to think about. Attribution as well, even down to domains, connectivity, and overlapping features. So one of the things that you're gonna have to do is you're gonna be figuring out where do we need to perform quality improvements, and we want to figure out what are strategies to move forward. So obviously internal SOPs, modeling and reporting. So how do we do that? Most people do that with data reviewer. So obviously want to identify all the issues, missing attribution, or have we loaded data where the domain was not honored? So those kind of things, and obviously topo relationships. So with reviewer, what are we looking at? It's pretty much the same thing over and over. If you've done reviewer, you kind of understand. We're looking at null values, relationship classes. So basic integrity, attribute, spatial checks, and then trace. One of the things I think you're going to really get intimate with is how your geometry of your network, the lines overlapping, things like that. We're talking really intimately on the spatial side. We're talking looking like duplicate vertices. They're in the same place. Technically, they're not in geospatial space. We're talking 6 places past the decimal. We're talking, it's crazy. So we're zooming in to the maximum level in Pro, and we're still seeing vertices almost stacked on top of each other, except for when you look to 6, they claim they're in the same space. 6 places past the decimal, they're really not. So you have to check for that and those overlapping features. So you're going to get really interested in, you're going to get really in depth with your checks. Go ahead. So we prioritized, obviously data reviewer will give you a kind of a level of severity, but it's kind of, do we want to handle this pre-migration? Do we want to handle this post-migration? Or can we just kind of deal with it, but we may have a performance issue and not have full functionality? So we kind of separated into 3, and I'm going to go ahead and just slide. And this is kind of one of the things that I'm really proud of. So I work in a shop that has some really great folks. We don't all work in silos. We all have partners. We have a couple of individuals in our group that just incredibly care about data integrity and how tight that data set is. I feel like we kind of had a good tight data set, but you don't ever know until you go this route, and then they scare you. But we migrated with 10,000 errors. When we migrated in 10,000 errors, they'd never seen that before. There were only 5, I believe it's 5 utilities in the country that have fully migrated and are in production on the utility network. So that kind of tells you we really jumped the gun. We wanted to be on the front end of this. We, for about 3 reasons. One, we knew that we weren't going to be able to edit in a geometric network in Pro. That doesn't exist. Even though you want to, it does not exist. You can edit attribution in the geometric network. You can pull it up, but you're not going to edit it in. So we wanted to get ahead of that. Number 2, we're an asset management shop. We wanted to add things to our schema. This is a really good time to be thinking about that if asset management is something that you care about, and that's what your shop does. And number 3, we knew we needed to migrate, and we knew we needed to have some kind of way to keep production in line and migrate at the same time. We can't close shop. The city doesn't stop. It's 24/7, 365. So we knew we wanted to go. So when we did get to this process with 10,000 errors, we were smiling all the way to the bank because we knew what this was going to do for us. So anyway, we caught, these are some of the errors that we were checking. Obviously, these were severity level 2. But I just kind of wanted to show you that, these are those numbers that you want to look at and you think about and you go, okay, which ones are the most important, which ones are the ones that are going to really kind of break us if we go forward or make us if we go forward. So we want to develop a migration plan. These two first items are probably the ones that you're going to get the most intimate with, is establishing your UN rules, the ones that apply to you. So there's going to be, I think there's like 1,400 rules that you can go through. You have to go through each one. You have to figure out if that is how your editing workflow goes. They have a junction edge junction kind of like background to the model. So you cannot generally have a line that's not connected to another line without some kind of node in the middle for obvious reasons. Hence, we're talking about geometric network. That's kind of how it was modeled too. But you can actually tell it, no, it will stay snapped. It will be connected, but I do not have to split the line there. Those are some of the things that you're going to have to think about. And do you operate that way? Does your shop operate that way, or do you not? So I just kind of, so this is actually some of the network rules of what actually we were going through. Red is dead, doesn't apply to us, or yes, it does. So this was just one of the things that we were going through. Obviously, you want to document everything from the front end to the back end. How do we do our edits? What are our workflows? How do we get the data in the system? And our third party impacts. So we're a shop where we have a work order management system that's tied to our GIS. So one asset has work orders that are actually tied to that asset. So we know all the different information about it, but basically something in real life is existing here, and we can write work orders against it. Hence a pipe, road, street cuts, the whole nine. So let's see. With the work order management system, obviously that was one third party that we had to deal with. We had multiple third parties that we were dealing with. Also applications that we had to figure out. We knew that we're going to break, and we had to develop workflows for all that. So we did, I think that covers everything we talked about. Yeah. Okay. All right. So how do we take, once we've done our checks, we have our documented workflows. We know what feature class, what item in this feature class is going to translate and migrate over to this feature class. All right, how do we get it there? So does anybody know about FMA Workbench? Everybody done that before? Well, y'all are more than me at this time. I had no clue that this existed. It was a great tool that we figured out how to learn. Actually, we didn't have to touch this. Our consultant helped us with this, but they stepped in and kind of walked us through it. And it was like, now we can do it. Now we can do it on our own. It's a great, what it functions as is a translator. So I need this item in this feature class, for example, a valve in the valves feature class. Technically, it's a hydrant valve. I need it to go into water devices, and it needs to be a water device subtyped out. But this is the translator, and that's how it works. You can do a renaming through this. You can change just about everything in the field. You can do anything you want. You can output it to any different kind of file type you can do. But anyway, this is the workbench. So we run the workbench, we run it through, and this is our output. So we know now we have our feature class to our GN feature class to our UN feature class. So we created a staging file geodatabase that we outputted that as, and then it comes the daunting task of figuring out the configuration of the enterprise. I did not have anything to do with this. Again, it takes a team. Everybody lives in a silo, really. And this is where our downtown IT GIS group really kind of came forward. You think your data model, or think your system requirements are maybe 2 times the size, 3 times the size, and then they scare you with it 6 or 7 times the size. You need a lot of horsepower, and thank you for downtown to lending us that support. And obviously we want to load, we want to configure permissions. This is a big deal. There are things you can do as the data owner that you can't do as as the editor. You need specific portal permissions. Which is a great functionality that I never knew why they did it this way until I needed it this way. But you can change the data portal easy, and that is so nice. And it's that basically a right click. And then of course you have to run the utility network through an extension. So obviously the extension download. And then where we are, and I kind of want to stop right here, is we would load this into a file geo database into Enterprise, and you're sitting pretty. We as the city are not in full production yet. We have a third-party integrator that we're trying to work through right now, and we're actually have a contract with them now with a company called GeoNexus, and they are basically our integrator to our EAM system. So once that is done and our tools are written for editing, we can fully migrate. But I kind of wanted to just preface with that first, because I don't want to say, hey, I know everything about, being in a production environment yet. But what I will say is that if you aren't editing in test, you are going to scare yourself when you go to production. You're going to figure out when you make an edit and you put a tap on a main that's not going to work, and you won't even edit it, and it'll basically scare you. And what's wrong? This is how we did it. Why doesn't it work this way? It could either be from a network rule that you don't have correct, or it could be something from a network rule in the mains that said we don't allow T's or couplings or something to connect to that pipe. So you really need to edit and know your steps on the geometric network side, and you need to know your steps on, because they're going to be very different in pro on how to edit on the utility network side. So I think that's pretty good. Keep going. So training. I can't say enough. So before we jumped into this big project, we consulted with folks that had already done this before. So we reached out through Esri and said, who has done any of this before, and can we call them? And they did. They were gracious. They helped us. We learned that a lot of the folks that kind of jumped the gun first were now going, I wish we'd have taken the training first. So there's 2 classes before I would recommend anybody. And I think it's foundation. I think it's foundations of utility network, and then it's configuring utility network is the 2. And then there's 2 or 3 more afterwards. But I would recommend you do that first. Do not think that you don't need that overview on the front end. You're going to be very lost. As an analyst that's been doing this for almost 15 years, it literally turned my head around backwards. I think I have a data set. Everything's in its own place. For example, hydrants are going to be in its hydrants feature class. That is not going to have a hydrants feature class in the utility network. It's going to be sitting somewhere in either a device, and everything's basically compacted. All your lines are in one feature class, and the points that you have, for example, valves or backflow preventers, they are probably going to be in some kind of either water junction or water device. And think we have everything listed over here in the GN as each individual feature class. Over here, it's going to be, what does it do? How does it function in your network? If it has a real function like a system valve for shutting things off, it's going to be in this feature class. If it is just something that sits there like a reducer, things flow through it, then it's going to be sitting in another feature class like a junction. So how does that work when you're developing viewers and you have 4 feature classes and everybody's looking at, hey, I had 11 in my viewer before? I don't know. So you got to be thinking, how are we going to make this work? How are we going to make it simple for everybody? Training is this best way. So obviously you're dealing with version editing over here. You're going to be dealing with branch versioning over here, or branch versioning over here. So different style of editing. You've never hit the validate button before. That's going to be in every step, every edit. You're going to have to validate your rules. So again, this is changes on just your daily workflow of how you're getting your edits into the system. And then building subnetworks. A really cool little piece to the utility network is the ability to for assemblies and subnetworks. I feel like this is probably the most valuable piece for getting information out and really focusing on asset management, focusing on water loss, focusing on what our system is really doing. So for example, a subnetwork, let's just hypothetically say we have a water treatment plant or our water plant, and it's pushing water out into the system. And we have this section where basically it makes a T, and it's all going to this one big, huge neighborhood. And for our purposes in asset management, our water loss, we want to consider we have a system valve right here, right at the front before everybody else. And we all know we have meters to each of these customers that are in this, let's call it basin. And basically it's a big subtraction problem. We know how much usage these people have, businesses, residents, commercial, in industry. And then we have the system valve. So it's basically a big subtraction problem. The difference is water loss somewhere in the system. Subnetwork, right click, attributes, done. You have a subtraction problem. This gives you a lot of answers, can really help out. So these are some of the things that I really feel like that are valuable that most people don't have a clue that it actually can function this way. So this is what I wanted to talk about. Let's see. I think this is about it. So this is actually our test environment, but we are testing a full editing workflows. And so kind of what I wanted to say was we wanted to understand how we edit in the utility network in Pro with the same editing workflows of when we were in the GN. So what we've done is everybody who is an editor in this that edits water has practiced this, has went through these steps, understands that things don't edit, you don't edit the same workflow as you did before. It can be easier, can be harder, but you have group templates, you have things that will kind of physically draw themselves if you have a redundant methodology in your editing system. So we really wanted to, I wanted to show that, you can do this, but it's just definitely a different workflow. One other thing that I want you to understand is there's one more piece, there's one more feature class that the utility network will throw out there. And it's basically its validation and its error system. So this is an example of when we were doing some small editing, simple editing. Let's say, for example, we were putting in a new service to a new commercial situation. That would be, basically a tap or a coupling. On the main, you're talking about a couple of valves, a backflow, a hydrant, and then a meter. And then it goes to the commercial business. If you do nothing and you just edit kind of the same old way, you're going to get a set of polygons that show up, and they're kind of like a virtual polygon. It's basically looking at the network, just telling you if it has errors or not, and have you validated it. So basically it's going to throw a purple box here if it just hasn't been validated. And so it's like it hasn't run up against the network rules and said, hey, you're kosher, you're good. Or it's going to say their edits. It'll throw immediately if you cannot edit against it. It'll throw immediately if you can't touch that asset to the other asset. So you can't touch that main to that valve or whatever. And then if it is against the rules that you have set up, it's going to throw out an error box. So those error boxes can be something that are very taxing to the system. Again, the whole reason why you want to get your data readiness, you want to reduce the amount of errors that you're going to bring over to your utility network side, because each one of these is going to be very taxing to the system. And that's the whole reason why they want you to really try hard on reducing the numbers, because they're just going to keep coming. Let's see if I read I think I made that example. Yeah. I think I'm good to go. Oh, one other option. So one way that you can find these errors, obviously by searching through and looking for red boxes. Sometimes red boxes are really small. They just want to tell you what is incorrect, and that incorrect could be literally 1 point and one small line. Sometimes you have to find it. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Error Inspector is a tool that comes with Arc Pro. It is a very good tool for finding errors on the utility network side once you're over there. So you'll basically open up Error Inspector. What comes out is basically a list of attribution that comes from that virtual polygon box that comes through and gives you the error messages, and it also gives you that location you can zoom to, right click, and so now you know how to fix your problems. And I think that is it. Questions? Yes, sir. Oh, yes.
All right. So seeing that the utility net or the geometric network loses support in 2024, any utility shops around that are thinking it's time to get started? City of Wilson has already started, but I like to hear you're a little further ahead than we are. How much time has it taken to get from planning to data validation to the point that you're at now? How long is that?
Thanks, Jeff. I would say about 8 months. And that's with the shop doing its normal function at the same time. Nobody works in a silo. We had basically 2 analysts on this project, 1 editor and 1 programmer. Our boss actually moved up, and between the 2 analysts and I, we pretty much picked up the program management role and we did it ourselves. Now, I'm not saying that we did everything ourselves. I'm saying we handled that portion of it ourselves. So 8 months. What I do think though, is it's a steep learning curve, but once you're at that top, I figured it out, the next one's not going to be near as bad. Sewer, we're not predicting an 8-month turnaround. We're going to predict like a 4-month turnaround because one, a lot of this, the integration with our work order management system, the third-party integrations are going to be handled. And also some of those errors and lessons learned before are really going to smooth that out. Next, any other questions? Thank you.